Commercial real estate professionals have unique insights into the workplace. They have relationships with tenants and clients and have an important communication and leadership role always, but now more than ever, as we re enter the workforce during the COVID-19 pandemic, as the Safer at Home order is lifted and guidance from federal and state officials is released pertaining to workplace safety and building compliance. We have a number of professionals who have agreed to talk with us today about some of the best practices and guidelines for approaching reentry. This is a snapshot in time and is dependent always on individual circumstances. There are resources constantly being shared, and CARW, along with other organizations, seek to curate, develop, and share what we have. We are all in this together, and our panel, along with so many others who we have talked to over the last several weeks, have been so gracious with their time and their resources. More information and resources can be found on our website at carw.com.
Well, we start with our team at Millbrook, and with that team is already broken out into groups that are doing a lot of research. And we have Jen Sweeney on the call who can put a little more detail into that. So with that, we're trying to figure out what works best for our buildings, being the one I'm managing in Wisconsin and the one that's the rest of them that are in Illinois. So we're trying to follow the CDC and all the different protocols that we're seeing that's happening out there, and yet taking into consideration what our tenants are looking for. So it's a process, it's a changing process daily.
Marilyn, how are you approaching the reentry?
So we've been trying to work with our tenants as well, trying to understand what their expectations are of us as we manage these buildings and try to prepare them for when these employees start returning to work. Trying to understand from our tenants, are they making changes to their operations? Are they starting to work in different shifts? Do we need to make adjustments to the building, to operating hours, to cleaning times? You know, all of those kinds of things. We've looked at our common areas and our amenities and changes that we need to make to those services as well. Just trying to make sure that we're operating within the CDC guidelines and, you know, governor's orders, and then trying to understand how the tenants view that and apply it to how we operate the buildings. So it's a bit of a moving target. We learned some lessons early on when we first closed. And, you know, there's probably some things we'll have to adjust as we learn and get people back in the buildings and find out what hurdles there are that we didn't anticipate, but we'll try to react quickly. That's kind of the best we can do, right? This is not something we can pull out a book and look and see what the rules are. There aren't any rules, so we're figuring out as we go.
Marilyn, are there any themes that you've seen emerge as you talk to various tenants?
I don't know. I think everybody's concerned about their employees' health and safety and trying to make sure people are comfortable coming back to work. I mean, our own employees have those same concerns, right? And we've looked at our own staff and how we should change things. We've had to change how we operate ourselves. I'm sure all of our tenants are doing the same things. What changes do they need to make internally? And then I think there has to be some understanding of the roles, right? As the landlord in a multi-tenant building, how do you dictate or don't you dictate anything and allow the tenants to dictate what happens in their suites? But then how do you apply the common area functions and somehow hit a midpoint between all the variations of what tenants are doing? So it's complicated, but I think it feels like there's a better willingness to collaborate and work together than maybe there has been in the past. And I'm hoping that that's something that sticks around for the long term.
Jen, can you talk a little bit about how you guys are approaching the reentry?
Sure. I pretty much would reiterate what Chris and Marilyn said. You really have to form a team of people that you trust, and people that can go out and do the research, and then collectively you can get together and share what you've learned and then implement that. And I think that, as Marilyn suggested, we've been sending out questionnaires to our tenants to gauge what's going to happen in their office. So not only were we preparing our building for the tenants, but we wanted to know what the tenants were doing so that, you know, the tenant in suite 200 knows that we're asking the tenant in suite 250 if they're putting together a plan, because we want to make sure we're doing what's right for our building, but then also that we're sort of making all the tenants accountable for putting together their own return to work plan. And surprisingly, I think that the tenants have, they've started it, but they have a lot of unanswered questions. They're not quite sure, should we take temperatures? Should we wear gloves? Should we wear masks? Should we come back in phases? And I think having a town hall meeting with all of your tenants is a great idea for them to share kind of a forum for what each one of them are doing. Again, there's not necessarily a right answer or wrong answer. It's about what everybody else is doing in the building. And I think that's beneficial for the tenants.
That's great. Jenna, I know you've been doing tours. You work on a multitude of properties. Can you talk about what you've noticed as you've been out and about, not just during the shutdown, but as people are starting to talk about reentry?
Sure. You know, so activity has definitely not been where it was when we started the year. So we've sensed a slowdown. But at this point, I think the most important way that we can represent our landlord clients and efficiently service these buildings is by making sure everybody feels comfortable. So it's not just setting up a tour, showing a space as you normally would, but it's asking questions. Do you want me to wear a mask? Do you want me to just open up the space and have somebody go in? I don't have to be on the tour. Would we do a video tour, take photos? It's just making sure that we're accommodating everyone and their comfort level and their safety concerns. And we're lucky that we have the technology to be able to address a lot of those concerns too.
Do you find that people are most often wanting you to just prop open the door and just allow them to go without you? Or are you sensing that they still want that human contact, but maybe with a mask on or with other protection?
Sure. I think really travel has been the big issue. So the times that I've been asked to take photos or to do video tours, it's really been because they're out of town facilities people who can't get into town to take a look. So in my experience, people still want to come through buildings. They may ask to wear a mask or want to wear a mask, but I really get the sense that people still physically want to be in the building as often as possible.
Ben, you have been on the front lines of this conversation, not just in a consultative role, but physically helping tenants reimagine space, helping landlords get comfortable with retrofitting their space, signage, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of what's the attitude towards that, and how are people embracing it? Are they looking at this as a short-term situation, midterm, or long-term, or all of the above?
Yeah, we've been really grateful for the response that we've gotten personally with our return to office toolkit. We partnered with another local Milwaukee company, Splat DPI, to create a wayfinding kit. And I think that it kind of, from what a lot of us have said on the call, people have various opinions and feelings on what they may or may not need to do. And what we're trying to do is open a dialogue with everybody that we talk to get a sense as to what their perspective is before we try and bring a solution forward. Because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we certainly are not medical professionals, and we don't want to pretend that we are. But I think what we found with the return to office kit is that common sense measures that we're bringing to the table with the wayfinding bring comfort to most everybody, because we don't know where the other person is at. So if we can put some of these basic common sense measures in our buildings, most everybody will adapt to them. If you have, somebody in your office that's always, known to walk into your office and sit down and talk to you, I think a lot of people don't want those types of things to happen as they re-enter the office. So a decal at the door, the decals at the elevators and at front lobbies and those types of things, really everybody can get behind because they check a lot of boxes. And in terms of the flexibility, as a design company, as a furniture programmer, as a furniture dealer, we always want our clients to think about flexibility and multi-uses to the products that they're purchasing, because what your office pre-pandemic or 24 months from now, what offices look like when they engage with a company like us, that can change very, very quickly. 6 months later, they could have new leadership or new products, and they need to be flexible. So a lot of the things that we're bringing to the table right now with the Return to Office Toolkit, we want people to think of them as not just purchases for right now, but things that they can use down the line. Whether it's mobile partitions, whether it's up mount screens on workstations, or whether it's the fabrics and finishes that people are considering. A lot of those things can help right now, but they also can be very viable down the line. So that's something that we want to make sure people are aware of, that these are not just in the heat of the moment type decisions. Let's talk about ways that these products can help long term as well.
We've been sending out an update to our tenants, typically about once a week. And the last update really gave a good outline as to, the things that we are doing in the building to date, specifically HVAC, filters, airflow. We remind them that as of today, our building has been no positive test. That's what they want to hear too. First and foremost, we haven't changed anything with our janitorial, cut back on any of those services. So for them to know our processes, which is more than a page long, I had so many tenants say that brought them comfort. Then that kind of helps them, gives them some guidelines as to what maybe they're going to do within their own space and where they start. The other part was, it's a work in progress. Some people are very relaxed on it. Some people are very stringent on what they want to do. And I felt that being in the building all last week and being present, saying it is safe, it's fine, brought a lot of comfort to the tenants. And then just to handle it one-on-one, calling them, stopping by. I didn't do anything that was unannounced because I thought that would be too much. And some of it was as simple as they're having a hard time getting face masks, hand sanitizers, and I was delivering it to them. It isn't for long term. It was something as much as maybe, that week or the next 2 weeks. And having that one-on-one conversation really seemed to help ease the concerns. And then they could tell me what they were concerned about. But some of them have a hard time getting, the different hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer was one of them, or disinfectants. And then we also are trying to provide ways for them to get it, different resources. So that's been a comfort, and that's been a really key thing.
So Marilyn, as you talk to clients, tenants, what are you finding? Is it their kind of responsibility to obtain the, whether it's a thermometer or whether it's a mask, or is that something that the landlord can help provide? Just as when a broker is giving a tour, they would have a mask with them should the prospective client want to have a mask. What are you finding?
So we have not really assisted any of our tenants in getting any of the PPE materials. I think it's difficult to source for a lot of people. It has been for us as well, even finding hand sanitizers in large quantities, that type of thing, where people are asking for it to be seen in the common areas. As far as what they're doing in their spaces, we did have a tenant who actually asked us if we were going to be taking temperatures of everyone who comes in the building, and we said no, that we're going to leave those decisions up to the individual tenants, because like we discussed earlier, you know, there's a lot of opinions on what should or shouldn't be done in that regard when it comes to the masks and the gloves and taking temperatures and so forth. We want people to feel safe, but there's a fine line between us as the landlord and the employers in the building. And I think we have to allow the employers to be able to do what they need to do. And we'll try to adjust our operation around that, I guess, rather than impose things upon them. So it's really working hand in hand with them. We too have been sending out weekly updates on what's been happening. We had actually contracted with our cleaning company to provide additional cleaning services early on before everybody closed down. So we retained the kind of key people in our accounts because we were concerned about what happens now when we're ready to all come back. And if we don't have those people available, it would be a problem for us. So we did ask them to keep them on staff. Surprisingly, our buildings, we didn't have any that officially closed because our initial reaction was to close our offices, and we thought there'd be nobody in the buildings and we'd need to lock them down. And we locked them for a couple of days, and we had so many problems with people not being able to get other people in or deliveries or what have you. We ended up opening them all back up again, and they have been accessible the entire time. Now there's certainly offices that are closed, but so we really are just working hand in hand. And as far as providing things for the tenants, it's pretty hard for us to do that.
So if you were to guesstimate when the order is lifted, so let's call it May 26th, let's call it June 1st, what percentage of your tenants in the buildings that you operate do you believe will be at the office, back at the office, and at what capacity? Do you have a
Well, I think 100% of them will be open. I think there'll be all kinds of different operations, though. I think there'll be staggered start times, and you know, they may flex their shifts a little bit. They may allow people to keep working from home. I think it's going to be sort of all over the board. I would guess maybe 50% of the total employees back on our sites at a time.
Got it. Jen, when you think about the operations, Millbrook's portfolio, Chicago, Wisconsin, multiple states, can you point out any differences between the cultures in the two states? Is there anything of note that you would point to, whether it's density, whether it's the way people get to work? Because there's obviously a big difference between urban and suburban offices, I would think.
Sure, and that really is the key difference, is the density between downtown and the suburbs. So public transportation in Chicago is probably a little greater than public transportation in Milwaukee, but I think that I think owning suburban Chicago office buildings, we're waiting to see what happens on June 1st. How many of those people are going to go to work, and how many of those people who are going to go to work are going to be driving? And I don't think Milwaukee's traffic is as bad as Chicago, but that will hold true for Milwaukee as well. How many of those people were taking some form of public transportation that now will be driving, which is going to add to the congestion, commute times. So I think that will definitely be the biggest difference. And you may see some shift. I don't know in the Milwaukee market as much as you would maybe see in the Chicago market, because Chicago is so much more dense. But you may see a shift over a period of time for some offices to come back out to the suburbs or to have a split office. Companies, it's really too soon to tell. I think companies are, you know, in the short term, this is probably going to be very negative for office buildings, but in the long term, I would say it's going to be neutral to positive for office buildings. while tenants work through this, because there's too much uncertainty to make big decisions.
So on that note about the density, and we'd also talked about whose responsibility is it to do the temperature checks, the masks, so on and so forth. Is there ever a liability issue in terms of kind of the grouping at an elevator bank or as people are coming into the building? Because there's naturally going to be some sort of grouping. Are you hearing from tenants that they're concerned about that, and perhaps there should be additional efforts by the owners to manage that? I'm thinking even particularly for buildings that don't have security. And you see that a lot in the suburban office setting.
Sure. You know, I have to say, surprisingly, we haven't had a lot of tenant requests, and I think it's because the tenants are still working through this and they're still figuring it out. They really are not, they don't know. And so when we prepared our guidelines, we sent them out to our tenants last week. You know, we received a handful of emails back from the tenants to say, thank you, this is great. Like we just needed something maybe to like kind of kick us in the butt and get us started. And like I said, we've offered to our tenants to pull together some kind of forum or a town hall meeting where they can connect with each other, or they could connect with us. We're not saying we have all the right answers. These are certainly business decisions that our tenants have to make on their own, but we can sit down with them and we can help them and guide them. You know, sometimes you just need a leader on your task team to get the ball rolling. So we haven't had a lot of requests from tenants. We did get the temperature question, and we absolutely are not going to be doing that. You know, there's some HIPAA law violations with it. There's just some logistics behind it, and it just doesn't make sense for landlords. It doesn't make sense for us as a landlord to do it, but we would support a tenant. And we've actually found some companies they provide that service. So, you know, just like with the furniture, any way that we can help our tenants, we're going to send them some sort of referral. You know, we're not doing it, but here's a company who is.
Ben, when you look out, I mean, you've obviously been talking a lot with the clients to understand what their needs are to design and redesign physical adaptions for them. Can you talk a little bit about the concerns immediate 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months out? Because you did talk about how they can maybe reconfigure their desk space, their office considerations. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? You had mentioned, you know, spreading out, they're changing some of the scheduling, a little bit more in depth there.
Sorry, I had some little guys in the background I muted. Yeah, you know, one of the things that, can you guys hear? Okay, good. One of the things that is kind of, you know, we've been, to make light of it, a little black humor for our industry in this regard is that, you know, as you guys know, you know, square footage per employee in office space has certainly been going down. Panel heights have been going down, and then collaboration space and community space have become so much more desired in our environments. So that certainly presents a challenge for a lot of people, and a cost. You know, people have invested a lot of resources to create a lot of these spaces. So you know, as I've been talking to people, you know, I think a lot of companies are looking at phased approaches to their reentry. Maybe, you know, if a company is 100 employees in an office, maybe 30 are going to come back in June, 30 in July, 30 in August. One of the things that we're going to be rolling out at Coakley Brothers is groupings where, you know, if the 6 of us are in group A, you know, we're in the office for the first 2 weeks of the month, and, you know, 6 in group B would be in the office for the second half of the month, to limit the numbers of folks in the space together. And then, you know, also, I think one of the things that is going to be important over the long term, you know, is, you know, we're really learning a lot about, you know, carpeting for example, as a keeper of the virus, as something where the virus can live for an extended period of time versus, a harder surface, an LVT material. So, those types of things that, a lot of people have gone, to LVT and, other composite type flooring products before this. So that's something that, can be looked at as not just a short-term investment to help battle the virus, but also a long-term, aesthetic decision that could make, cleaning easier, durability for flooring materials easier. So, those are things that, along with reconfiguring, I think the last thing that I'll say on that point is that some of the research that we've seen, in our industry is that a lot of, clients have seen the downside of open offices, the downside of lower panels and more collaborative work environments. So, this might be a way to kind of, recenter, the trend of the industry that, you can have, beautiful furnishings with low walls, but maybe just a little bit more privacy between users, a little bit more division. So maybe we'll put a storage piece on top of a low panel, or we'll put, a nice looking screen on top of a low panel. That'll help social distancing right now, but it'll also maybe help a little bit more productivity and privacy that, a lot of people, especially in the Wisconsin market, especially in Milwaukee, seemingly want. People still want their own space, and this might help them achieve that in a space that maybe was a little too low to begin with.
The real question I had for you is, as an office broker who deals with urban and suburban all over the place, how are you fine-tuning or changing the way that you're talking about the spaces in terms of whether it's Schlitz Park or whether it's Park Place? Can you just kind of walk me through that?
Sure. I mean, I think, the big question that everybody wants to know is, will this impact the suburbs? Are the suburbs going to come back and benefit in some way because of the coronavirus? Is the density going to be a concern? And will users that were perhaps considering relocating downtown tap the brakes on that and decide that they're more comfortable in a suburban setting where you're parking in a surface lot and going into a smaller building where you can take the stairs, you don't have as many people in the lobby. But to me, I don't really think that it's going to be a function of the suburbs winning or downtown winning. I think it's really going to be a comfort level situation. And I think tenants are really going to want to know how a building is managing cleaning services and what they're doing to be proactive. So it'll really be more of a flight to a quality product, regardless of location. When you have a good management team in place and they're communicating openly, talking about what processes are happening internally to keep everyone safe and healthy and informed. So in my opinion, it's really not going to be a location thing. It'll be more of a flight to quality product.
Parking, because you asked about that, and traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So traveling, people driving in Wisconsin are traditionally, people like to drive. Either it's economics that drives them to the public transportation, but a huge amount of people drive. So we've been actively working with SP Plus, who does manage our parking garage, coming up with a creative solution as to, we know it's within the first few months, we don't know how long it'll be, but a flexible option outside of the standard parking, either hourly rate or you get the monthly rate. So it does make for these flexible hours, these alternative days that people are going to be putting together. And it's working with TAPCO, who does the, the brains behind, like when you're checking in and out with your cards. We seem to have come up with something with SP Plus. So we're very hopeful on finding something that will work with the majority of our parkers are our tenants. So it helps ease some of that. And then we get flexibility, which is really for them. That's one thing that is evolving like today, that's being actively worked on. So I think to mention that, SP Plus manages quite a few. I'm sure the other parking garages are probably right alongside with them doing the same thing. It's the technology.
Technology is right helping us through this, and it will be here to stay. Marilyn, what will be permanent? What will be a permanent change?
I don't know what will be permanent, to be honest with you, because I think it's going to continue to evolve. I think it's too early to say, you know, is there going to be another big influx of cases in the fall? Does everybody end up getting sent home again? I mean, we just don't know. I think we just all have to, like Chris said, be flexible, and we'll be most successful if we are, because we have to be able to help our tenants through this and figure it out. They have to figure it out just like we do. I think one thing that's probably permanent in the next year, couple of years, is the additional sanitation in the common areas. I don't think that's going to go away. I think that's going to be an expectation, and I think all the tenants are willing to pay for it, for that extra peace of mind that at least things are getting cleaned and handled more frequently than they perhaps were in the past. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't really know what's going to be permanent.
I think the word is we need to be optimistic. I think, you know, we're all, we have professional buildings. We have a lot of good professional people in the area managing these buildings. I think we need to be optimistic and work together.
Ben, what do you think is going to be permanent? Anything on your radar?
I think that the changes in the way offices are designed and furnished will be different. I think that you know, panel heights and, you know, more square footage per employee, you know, will have to be important. And I also think, you know, to Marilyn's point, you know, cleanability. I think everybody's going to be hyper aware about, you know, clean environments and you know, making sure that if I sat on a chair, that it's clean when the next person comes in. So, you know, the healthcare industry has really been on the driving forefront of that in the last 10 years, let's say. And I think that those types of things, you know, like the textiles and fabrics that we've seen in healthcare environments that are, you know, cleanable, I think those types of things will be more common in office spaces. So I think that, you know, from an office layout and design perspective, you know, those things will be permanent changes. Whether the arc was going towards that way to begin with, probably partly, but I think it certainly will be, you know, here to stay, and they'll look a little bit different.
Jenna, how about you?
I think that our whole process will change a little bit when we're dealing with tenants that are from out of state. So whereas before you may have a few facilities people come in to take a look at a building or multiple buildings, I think a lot of that is going to go to a video tour or photos, and there'll be limited business travel going forward to make those decisions. So I think maybe we'll see a little bit more of a local decision maker touring, and it'll just change the process a little bit from that perspective.
Great. Jen, final thought on the changes.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say what's going to be permanent. It seems like nothing's permanent, but I do agree with everyone's sentiments. For sure, the square footage per person, you know, is no longer going to be like 100 or 125 because it got really small. And I think that's definitely, you're going to see an increase in that. But I think the work from home, you know, I read an article this morning in Cranes that a lot of companies have already told their employees that they're not going to be coming back to work for at least a year on a full-time basis, that they're still going to be phasing them. You know, they'll be working, you know, team 1, team 2, so they'll be still working at home and coming to the office, but not full-time. So I think you're going to see a lot of changes in company procedures like that.
You know, we have been working, we have been touring, and we're just excited to get things open and back up and running, and also to just really work with our tenant clients and our landlord clients to make sure that everybody feels safe when they're touring buildings, looking at buildings, and working through the real estate process.
Chris?
Well, that's great, Jenna. I mean, we want to communicate with our tenants at every level possible, you know, to understand their needs. We want to understand the brokers' needs that are coming into our building, not just the brokers that we have as our listing agents, but as anyone coming in, that our building is safe. And, you know, our phones are wide open to hear any of those comments and concerns, you know. And I think it's just one-on-one reaching out to people is the key thing to find out, not just these mass emails, is to connect with people. That's when you're really going to hear, you know, the really true thoughts and concerns.
Marilyn?
I've just been really impressed by how quickly people have been able to pivot as this has all occurred. There have been massive changes in how we function day to day, whether it's our own employees or the people who work in our buildings. And I think that that flexibility will be of great benefit going forward as people continue to adapt, because I just think this is not, it's not going to be a quick change. Things are going to perhaps happen more so slowly than they have in the past, and we're gonna have to be a little more patient, and maybe we've all had a little chance to step back and relax a little bit and, you know, let go of some of the stress. So maybe there's some positives to come out of this in the end.
All right, Jen, we'll go to you and then we'll wrap with Ben.
I think Jen is spot on with virtual tours, and it's something that Millbrook's been working on. And instead of a broker taking a tenant out to 10 or 12 different buildings, you're gonna see that you're gonna send them a virtual tour of your building, and then they'll narrow it down, and then they're gonna tour your building. And so I think it's really important that landlords take a good look at their building, and brokers and tenant prospects take a good look at their landlord to see what their landlord did during this time, because it's a true testament to the type of landlord and the type of building that you want to be in. Tracy, and you had said it before, that they'll remember when the lease comes up, which landlord was extra careful and took care of their tenants.
Great. Ben, we'll end with you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think that from my perspective, especially looking at in Wisconsin and Illinois, you know, the good work that we've all done to date to limit the spread. You know, I think to me that shows that we certainly can, in a logical way, re-enter the office over the next few months. I think all of the things that we've talked about, if we put them into practice, that, you know, we can do this. And, you know, that's where we get, you know, excited, you know, at our company in terms of helping with that. And I think a common sense approach to all of these things, helping promote, you know, social distancing in our spaces and giving people the tools to allow them to feel confident to come back to the office, come back to the, you know, hopefully the educational institution, the healthcare facilities, you know, that if we pool our resources together from, you know, architecture, construction, design, property management, brokerage, you know, that, you know, we all have the things that are needed. And if we do them and if we maintain and are in it for the long haul, you know, we can resume, you know, the positivity that we had before this. So, I'm optimistic about it.